Arcane showed us that alternate universe where things seem to be heading towards a better future, with a lot of characters having a way happier and more hopeful ending, given that, in the main timeline, it was just a disaster after disaster for most everyone, with death or things even worse than that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Right now, the happiest possible ending for present-day Aatrox would probably be just finally dying once and for all. Finally getting peace after no longer being trapped in that torturous, choking prison inside his sword, or having to stoop to possess some mortal body. Basically living like a parasitic addict, trying to get stronger and growing just to try to shape back into what he once was. But in that other totally perfect universe, the Acathian rebellion never happened, which means the traumas of the Ascended never happened either. And maybe, just maybe, Xerath's betrayal was stopped in that timeline too. With that, Azir could totally ascend normally, Shurima would keep prospering more and more, expanding its territory, with Aatrox as its great general. This towering figure with wings that could catch the golden light of sunrise, and armor so bright it shone like a constellation of hope beyond the Great Veil. He would just be a pure symbol of justice and light. Setika, queen of the Ascended host, is still alive, and he answers her call, just like many of his Ascended brothers and sisters, sharing their peak glory side by side. They stand together fighting in the name of Shurima, to the point that other lands end up being conquered and enslaved by the Sun Empire, turning it into the greatest superpower across Western Runeterra, and leaving them more ready for the war against the Void when the right moment finally comes. In her happy ending, Akali's father would not have died because of Zed's attack on the Temple of the Order of Shadows, and the events that follow in that short story, the bow and the kunai, would not happen. That means her friend Faye would not lose a leg from saving young Akali from an angry spirit. They would still be friends, and Faye would be the Fists of Shadow, while Akali would probably just be another acolyte in the Order, working alongside her best friend. And about her relationship with her mom, maybe it would still be serious, but not as bad as what we have in the main timeline. Amumu. This one isn't even hard to imagine. After all, Amumu suffers because he's never had a friend, since everyone who gets close to him ends up being cursed, rotting away and dying from his curse. On top of that, the curse also makes him lose it sometimes and throw these huge tantrums that cause even more destruction, like that music video he has shows. So you just imagine a universe where our little mummy Yordle was never cursed, or better yet, a universe where his curse is finally broken, and he can go through that cycle Yordles have of being reborn in Bandle City, letting him truly connect with his home and other members of his species, making lots of friends. Now how exactly his curse would be broken is impossible to say. Amumu is one of the most mysterious characters we have in the lore, so we just don't know. Or maybe he finally gets a friend, maybe someone who's completely immune to the curse, or someone who's immortal, but that's a tough one. A happy ending for Ashe would be if she, her mom, and her fathers actually found Throne of Avarosa, and they weren't killed by that ice priest sent by Lysandra. In canon, her mom, Grinna, goes after the throne relics but ends up dying, leaving Ashe alone. But in this happy ending, she'd still being groomed to be the future leader, with her mom and everyone else there with her. But if that still happened the same way as in the comics, it's possible that she and Sejuani never had that falling out that led them down different paths and made them rivals, each becoming war mothers of their own tribes. Instead, they'd still be together, fighting side by side, and they'd only be one tribe instead of two. This one's pretty straightforward. At the moment where Azir embraces Xerath and declares an end to slavery in Shurima, imagine if his best friend and confidant actually backed out of his plan and ambition, regretting what he was going to do, letting the ritual of ascension happen normally. Then Azir would ascend, the capital of Shurima would be intact with all its people because no catastrophe happened, and most importantly, his whole family would be alive and safe. I'm talking his wife, his oldest son, his little daughter, and even the youngest one still in the wife's belly. Shurima would celebrate and prosper even more, becoming a superpower that in Azir's vision would keep expanding. So Ionia, Freljord, and other nations would either join the glorious Shuriman Empire led by Azir or be conquered by his might if they dared oppose him. It's obvious that Shurima wouldn't normally dominate all of Runeterra, but here in this perfect world, that totally would happen. Maybe with tons and tons of ascended warriors being created over the millennia. Xerath would still be his advisor, and who knows, maybe after all his mortal life had run its course, Azir himself would talk the priests of the sun to let Xerath ascend too, given how much he served the Emperor and all of Shurima. But we have no idea what would happen with that. On one hand, since it's meant for him, it might work. On the other hand, because his body has so much dark magic in it, maybe it'd still go wrong. Either way, considering how much control he has over magic, it's pretty likely he wouldn't live a normal mortal life and might keep going throughout the ages anyway. Bran's story is pretty heavy. His life has basically always been a total disaster, especially how badly him and his mom were treated. They lived isolated, and even when she helped people with her knowledge, she didn't get any gratitude for it. A happy ending for Bran would be him and his mom finally being accepted by the people around them, actually living among them, and of course him getting the love and approval of the girl he loved so much, marrying her, and having a daughter. That's totally different from what happens in the main universe, because not only did everything go wrong, but when Bran tried to take revenge, he actually ended up accidentally killing the woman he loved, her husband, and her little kid. Tragic. For sure, Darius could have a very different ending too. In another universe, if he had really listened to Quilletta Varn and see what Noxus had become, he might have stood with her in the rebellion she led, and then she would still be alive by his side. And they'd basically be fighting in the resistance movement for a truer vision of Noxus, not what was actually happening, where innocent people and soldiers were sacrificed in Ionia with chemical weapons. In that future, even with all the battles and struggles, Darius could come out triumphant with Quilletta at his side, even with a new child between them. Honestly, I don't think he would dominate Noxus and become this kind of leader that changes the entire region's worldview, since there are way more powerful beings in charge than him. In that case, maybe he'd take power in Noxus and change the vision he had back then, staying in his position but way happier with a family. A happy ending for Diana would be that moment when she and Leona both ascended after being chosen by the aspects of the moon and sun. Leona would realize that her friend and her romantic interest was right about what she said regarding the answers about the Solari dogmas and customs, and that both of them would confront those teachings together, showing that the moon and sun used to be united in the past, and that they could still be that way. With that, they would go down together as champion aspects, protecting and guiding both the Solari and the Lunari together. Garen's dream ending would be about how he sees mages as dangerous. He'd see his sister Lux married to Jarvan IV, and that way know she would be safe and not judged. Or maybe in this other world, Lux would simply not be a mage, plain and simple. What about Katarina? Maybe she would be Demacian too, fighting alongside Garen instead of against him. And Demacia would keep prospering with honor and justice and duty. The happy ending for Irelia would be that she doesn't have to carry the burden she's had on her shoulders since she was 14, and lost her entire family during the first Noxian invasion. If Ionia had stood up properly, maybe they'd still be here, and she wouldn't have to go through all that grief and trauma from her loss. Plus, being turned into this symbol of resistance against the invading Noxians. She could grow up without all that pressure and all that bad stuff hanging over her. And well, an even better ending than that would just be if there was simply no Noxian invasion at all.
Before we keep going, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member. You'll get access to some really cool perks, like picking video topics or getting early access to videos.
If Jax had killed the mages from Acacia who wanted to use the Void as a weapon to start a second rebellion against Shurima to free Acacia from oppression, then the Void wouldn't have been unleashed the way it was when it was just widened the rift and let it through. Even if Jax might have been seen as a traitor, it'd be really interesting to see if the Emperor knew that story and sent the warriors priests to seal the rift discovered there. And given what Jax did, someone like Nasus could argue with all those wisdom, starting to put an end to how cruel and oppressive Shurima was towards Acacia. So stuff like that wouldn't happen. Asking that Jax be named the first Acathian to join the army of the Ascended, making him go through the ritual of ascension. And that would start to change the cycle of hatred that Acacia felt. Because before that, they weren't recognized by the Shrimans and were treated like slaves. Or Jax could just outright kill those mages and explain to the council what he did. He could be punished for his crime, but Acacia would still be around today. And once they heard his story, Zillion would definitely stand up by him and manage to convince the council to grant Jax a pardon, since he also knew that danger that weapon hidden deep down would cause. A happy ending for Kai'Sa would be if the Void hadn't swallowed her whole village and killed everyone she knew, including her mom, neighbors, and friends. Instead, she would grow up curious about the world and work like her dad, traveling and doing escorts for artifacts to buyers in other lands, like Piltover for example. She'd be this explorer adventurer, always coming home with tons of stories to tell, knowing she would find her mom and dad still alive and well, along with everyone she knew before. She wouldn't have depression, her body wouldn't be taken over with her skin consumed by a void creature, and she'd never know what it is to be truly alone. A A happy ending for Callisto would definitely be the one where she managed to stop the poison dagger from hitting Viego, without it hitting Isolde either. Or maybe she arrived in time so Isolde still had a few extra hours or days before dying from the poison, enough for her to be taken to the Blessed Isles and healed. The torment would never happen, and Viego would be more than grateful, much to Hecarim's displeasure, and his true nature might even end up being exposed too. And with that, Callisto would even stay closer to the king and queen, with Viego finally getting his act together and becoming a more just ruler who actually cares about his people, instead of doing all those terrible things he was doing up until that point. Kael's happy ending would be one where her sister didn't have much of an opposite personality and worldview. That means sharing the same vision of justice for sinners and criminals, without the whole redemption and forgiveness side that Morgana believes in and preaches. In this reality, Morgana would embrace her divine side instead of repressing it, and both of them would still be in Demacia as its winged protectors. Going even further, it's possible that they would both give up their humanity together and fully transcend to aspects, just like their mother did. Morgana's happy ending, on the other hand, would be one where her father was still alive, since she loved him deeply, and where that fight with her sister never happened. In this version, Kael wouldn't have that ambition of wanting to be like their mother, and would lean more to her mortal side, staying close with her sister and father, even developing a different view of justice. And just like Kael's ending, I believe that both of them would continue protecting Demacia and guiding its people. In Miss Fortune's happiest ending, her mother wouldn't have died because of Gangplank. Instead, he would be the one who died when he tried to steal the pistols. With that, Sarah would become a gunsmith just as skilled as her own mother, working in her family's forge and building her own reputation all across Bilgewater. Here, a happier ending would be if both of their parents hadn't died on the bridge. Then they could have grown up with them and their uncles. You definitely see Powder exploring her genius in a way that's more creative, building cool filters or even inventions to help the people of Zon. Maybe caught the eye of Victor, and maybe even earning a scholarship to go to the same academy in Piltover, just like Victor did. And Vi would just watch her sister grow up, and she might work at Vander's bar, or maybe become a professional fighter. She'd have her friends and family cheering her on, being there when she wins. Totally different from that horrible version we saw of her in The Ring and Arcane. Here, the happy ending would be Yasuo didn't abandon his post as Master Soma's protector, so he'd be there when Riven came to ask for help, and he'd somehow stop or redirect one of the fragments of the blade that killed him when she shattered it with that wind technique. In other words, he wouldn't be considered as a traitor and hunted down, and Riven's story would be a lot different too, because even if it wasn't possible to fully destroy the sword, she wouldn't accidentally have caused Master Suma's death and fled. After that, we'd see Yasuo, Yone, and even Riven training together, and them three fighting against the Noxian invasion together. Yasuo would still have his honor and his brother, and maybe even a new partner. I even have a whole video about this what if. But yeah, that's basically it. See you guys in the next video.